As I said in the beginning, thank you so much for this opportunity. Ministerial school has grown me in many, many ways, but one of them has becoming more comfortable with sharing your story, sharing your light. So this is a big step for me, and I'm glad that I feel so warmly welcomed here. So thank you for that. Um, I'm going to start out just by sharing a little bit about my background, my story, and then I'll go into a little bit about how I rewrote my own story. And I trust that there will be something, a nugget of wisdom for each of you today. I know that although our experiences are all very different, there are so many common things in humanity that we're all more connected than we realize. So I'm 36 years old. I was born with this disability called cerebral palsy. I won't go into the many details of that, but it's definitely a big part of my story. So I like to present it in the room. I've always been very spiritually inclined ever since I was quite young. When I was 6 and 7, I could see auras. I could, you know, often tune into people's thoughts and different things that I didn't understand. But at that young age, I didn't question. Then as I got a little older, I started to rediscover these abilities and I wanted to explore them. When I was growing up, we weren't particularly religious or spiritual. My mother did not want to impose any tradition on me because she didn't particularly have one herself. So she just kind of let me discover my own path. And when I walked into Centers for Spiritual Living, I think it was the second time they were having a talk and then music similar to what many centers do. Didn't know anybody there. But in the middle of the talk, like many others have shared, I just became so emotional. And I didn't really realize why at the time. But, reflecting back, I was just overwhelmed with this sense of love and acceptance. It was at a time when I was just moving out on my own, not only dealing with those kind of normal things that kind of stretch you when you move out on your own for the first time, but also, dealing with having many, many caregivers to look after my needs. So it was a time that was full of growth and discovery and lots of questions and emotions. And I remember as I was just crying, I saw this image of me speaking on stage. And I thought, that cannot be for me. Like, I'm so far from that. I can barely, speak to 2 or 3 people confidently. But I kept seeing this image, and something in me knew that it was connected to what I was supposed to do, my purpose. Um, and one of the things that I like to share with people is that for me, the science of mind teachings have completely transformed the way I see the world. I used to see my wheelchair and my circumstances as a confinement, as a burden, as a limitation. But through science mind, I've realized that my wheelchair is my vehicle for freedom because my wheelchair is what allows me to be in this world and share my light with everybody else. So once I really got that from my head to my heart, then that was one of the first major shifts that gave me the confidence to say, I think I could be a minister. I think I could do this. It's within my capability. And when I was thinking about the topic of memories, um, two things came up. One, memories can be things that nourish you, things that support you, things that feel loving, but they can also hold you back and keep you stuck, depending on what the energy is around these memories. So for me, it was uh, about transforming a lot of memories around my body is limited, my life is limited. Um, I will never find a relationship, etc., etc. Lots of things. Um, and it can also be something that you can really use as a touchstone, a positive memory to give you that boost of spirit or that boost of inspiration when you need it. Also, um, it comes a time where you need to kind of transcend memory or a past in order to capture a new idea. So I want to share with you briefly um, two things that I have used to work with memories and found helpful. The first one is more to do with a positive memory and how you can use it to kind of up-level your consciousness. And that is through a process called taking in the good. And I found it from Rick Hanson, who has a wonderful book about hardwiring happiness, wonderful books about the brain and how it influences your experience. And he has this simple process um, that I'm going to share. Before I do that, as I'm just getting it up, uh, I will share about the other tool, and that is sometimes it's beneficial to work through a memory, reframe a bad memory, or kind of resource yourself by thinking of a good memory. But sometimes, when we're in memories, we're either in the past or the future. And the present moment is really where the power is. So one of the tools, which is common to Centers for Spiritual Living, is visioning. And the reason I bring up visioning is because when you're working with your memories, with those memories is a lot of preconceived ideas, not necessarily bad, not necessarily good. There's just assumptions and conclusions and different feelings that all come up with a memory. And sometimes when these are difficult to wade through, it's beneficial to kind of rise above them and see them from a higher view. So I often use visioning not only for big things like what is my purpose or what is the mission of this organization, but also things like what is keeping me, what is my highest good for this situation? What do I need to let go of? And what do I need to embrace? Now, there's many ways of visioning. I usually follow the way that Michael Beckwith has spread around. But for me, it helps me to be in that objective state where I'm not in the memory, I'm just in this present moment. And like a good ministerial student, you know, I have an Ernest Holmes quote, and that quote is, never limit your life by your past experience. Uh, my computer is being a little bit stubborn today, so I'm just going to continue the talk, but I promise we'll get to the practices, okay? I also wanted to tell a bit of how I've worked with memories rather than just about rising above them. There is times when it's very beneficial to work with the memory. And what I found is if you come at the memory from the place of the divine, that part of you where God resides, that high consciousness, you can actually transform it and change the emotion, release the emotion. So I have done a lot of forgiveness work around certain people and certain memories, whether they be doctors, physical therapists, or anybody that I have kind of a negative association with. And I found that by really going through the practice of doing forgiveness on the situation and then imagining how you would like it to turn out, imagine it going for the highest good, did change my mood. I felt a shift in my body, and I could think about this situation without getting fired up. So when you're in that divine illumined mind, you can actually change how you see a memory or see it how God would see it. So the tools that I basically use for that is Ho'oponopono a lot of the time, and also, facilitating conversations with people who are alive or may not be alive to assist in the forgiveness of a situation. So I think we got this up now. I wanted to share with you a technique from Rick Hansen called HEAL. That's HEAL. And I'll explain it very briefly because it's simple. That's why I like to share it. Okay. According to Rick Hansen and other psychologists, the brain has what they call a negativity bias. Basically, what that means is their positive experiences tend to be less sticky than negative ones. It's kind of confirming with his research that, there's a reason why we remember a negative experience longer than we do a positive one. And there is actually evidence in the way that the brain works that supports that. So what he suggests that I use all the time is to, when you have a really wonderful experience, to really take the time to absorb it. If you cannot do it right at that time, you can do it from memory. But I wanted to share this with you. And the positive point about doing this practice is that once you take in the good and make it a regular practice, it's more and more difficult for those negative experiences to stick. Okay, so the first step is to experience a positive awareness. And I invite you to try this with me as much as you're comfortable. This can be a pleasant memory with someone that you love, or even pleasant sensations that you're experiencing right now. You can tune into positive internal cues. Second step is to enrich that experience. Stay with this experience, feel it within yourself, the sights, smells, sounds, sensations, for at least 5 to 10 seconds. That step 2 is enrich it, make it a fully loaded experience. Step 3 is absorb it. You can do this by mindfully setting the intention for it to be a part of you. You can visualize the elements of this experience consolidating in your heart, consolidating in your brain. There is no wrong way to do this. I like to envision this experience fully, just going into my heart and then kind of flowing out into the body, but just to really absorb it. Okay. So now that you've really absorbed this positive experience or feeling, while you're still in that positive feeling, so keep that energy and also invite a situation where a person, something that has some negative energy around it. But at the same time, also continue to build this feeling of goodness and see how it feels with both of them there together. And this is really not a right or wrong answer. You cannot do this wrong. I do not know what book this is in, but what I have done is just made a document so I can send it to anybody. But doing this, if I remember to do this as a practice, then when I get into that situation of 5 alarm, that's what I go to right away. And I always like to, give something valuable that people can take away. The one last thing, hopefully I'm not going too much over, but I wanted to end by sharing something. A time when I really knew that my consciousness had up-leveled, my consciousness had changed because of the work that I had been doing. And with my disability and being in a wheelchair, I've been in hospital a lot, medical doctors a lot, and I used to have quite a severe case of white coat syndrome, meaning I did not like medical community very much because of some past experiences or memories. So I just wanted to share about how I kind of transformed that and rewrote the story around that. And many of my hospital experiences, without going into detail, have been longer than average, quite drawn out, and uncertain as many of these experiences are. And after some major surgeries, it got to the point where I so much didn't want to deal with any of that, that I kind of said, I'm not even going to look at it. But unfortunately, when you do that with your body, in my case anyway, it didn't turn out that good, because it meant that I wasn't in prime communication with my body. And if you don't listen to your body, it just has to scream louder at you to get its message across. So I thought, okay, now I'm in Science of Mind. I'm a little new, but Ernest Holmes says this is something you cannot prove to anybody but yourself. So I'm going to try this, and I'm going to really, do this seriously for my next procedure and see what happens. So when I got started to get really remorseful and, oh, I don't want to do this and why me and all this, went right up to the day of surgery. On the day of surgery, and about 2 weeks before I did this, I basically focused on God, focused on the good, focused on myself as the inlet and outlet of God, really got to that place where I knew that everything was in my highest good. I did a meditation every day, a prayer every day, which I wrote. And up until the day of the operation and going into the operating room, I was even saying a prayer as they were wheeling me off into the, like, I went 1,000%, just because I thought I'm going to prove it to myself. I did a parking space, must work for bigger things. So I did this. The doctor wondered what I was muttering under my breath, but that didn't really matter. And I did this. And unlike previous experiences, yes, I had pain, but I was taken to a place where I could have compassion for my body. And for the first time, I felt the pain, but I could view it as intense healing. And I just had this knowing that spirit was at work on my leg or my hip. And the doctor said to me, I've had you here before, and that's the fastest I've ever seen somebody come out of the hospital after this procedure. So it's like, okay, I got it now. So now what I do is in my ministry, is I don't try and prove it to others. I just say, give it a try. What have you got to lose besides feelings that you want to get rid of anyway? So yeah, that was a really powerful experience. So since then, I've really become a lot more compassionate with my body and realizing that that is part of God too. And that there was no mistake here. And I've since had mystical experiences where I've been shown the reason I came into this body. I did not ask for those. They just came because I totally let it go. And then I realized what I really want is acceptance. But I'm the only one that can accept myself. Once I do that, everybody else will follow. I remember I was doing a exercise in the prayer workshop for foundations, and we were supposed to list things that we wanted and what was under those things. I sat there for about 30 minutes, nothing. Well, I don't really want the car because I can't drive it. And I went through all these things. Everybody else is writing, but I'm not writing anything. This is kind of weird. And then at the last minute, I just had this epiphany and I said, she said, do you want me to write anything on your paper? And I said, acceptance. And I had this experience where it went through my body very cathartically and completely cleared out. I said, if I want to be accepted, I have to do it first. And I knew that in my head, but this is the time when I got it in my heart that that's what people really want, is authenticity. So with that, I'm just so grateful that you've allowed me to speak today. It was quite a lot, a little bit all over the place, but I feel very uplifted and inspired by everyone's energy. So thank you so much. And I'll give out my contact information if anybody wants to stay connected, completely your choice. So thank you so much. And so it is.